Let's bring in Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington, a member of the House Judiciary Committee and ranking member of the Immigration Subcommittee. She was just in Minnesota on Friday for a field hearing. Congresswoman, thanks so much for being here. First, your reaction to these reports that more than 1,000 active duty troops are on standby for this possible deployment to Minnesota.
Anna, I think it's a really dangerous situation. Already what we heard in Minnesota on Friday and over the last couple of weeks that everything has been happening is that the ICE and CBP agents are making Minnesota less safe, not more safe. Now you add in the threat of a militarized force that has so rarely been used on American soil against civilian protesters who are exercising their First Amendment rights. And you essentially create even more of a tinderbox than we already have. And I think what is important is that the residents of Minnesota understand that Trump is trying to get them to incite all kinds of violent protest. And they are very disciplined. They are peaceful protesters exercising their constitutional rights. It is a terrible, terrible violation of an abuse of power, of the presidential power to send in these federal troops on top of the ICE and CBP agents.
We've also learned the Justice Department has opened an investigation into Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, alleging they've obstructed immigration enforcement in that state, according to two people familiar with the matter. Governor Walz called this weaponizing the justice system. As a member of the Judiciary Committee, how do you see this investigation?
Exactly the same way. And I spoke to Governor Walz when we were in Minnesota, and the mayor testified before us in the hearing. Look, this is a continuation of Trump's DOJ essentially going after anybody that they don't like, that they think is standing in the way of them having absolute power and abusing constitutional rights at their whim. And the latest targets on that list are Governor Walz and Mayor Frey. And again, you know, this is an attempt to suppress and intimidate. And I think that that's how we have to see this entire situation. And it was important that the court, a judge on Friday, I think it was, issued a ruling that essentially says, no, these ICE agents and CBP agents are violating constitutional rights. It's a temporary injunction, so we'll see what happens. But it went through, it's an 80-page court decision. It went through in detail how, you know, residents are being pulled out of their cars by their hair, pepper sprayed, they're putting tear gas into the cars where there are children in those cars, stopping people simply for what they look like, demanding ID. This is not the United States of America that we all have sworn an oath to. This is a lawless administration that is trying to abuse their power and violate constitutional rights without any accountability.
Under President Trump's first term, there was a call to abolish ICE over his immigration policies. You even introduced legislation to terminate ICE in 2018 and transfer its responsibilities to other agencies. And now we're starting to hear renewed calls to abolish ICE. I'm just curious where you stand on this issue right now.
Well, first of all, there's a DHS appropriations funding bill that is coming up in Congress. And I think that we should not be giving a dime more to ICE or CBP unless we have significant guardrails and accountability. Things like you have to have a judicial warrant for an arrest. You have to make sure that people have legitimate bond hearings and due process. These ICE and CBP agents should not be masked. There's a whole set of things that my subcommittee has drawn up and passed on to leadership and those who are negotiating the appropriations bill, because I think that Americans are quite horrified by what they're seeing. So that's the first thing. The second thing is when we have the gavels back, Anna, I do think that we need to look completely at DHS. It is a massive agency. We should look at where should the responsibilities of DHS lie and how do we want to structure these agencies? Because I do worry that the people that have been hired into into ICE and CBP now and the enormous amounts of money that we have put in have made it very difficult to reform. And I think we may have to recreate and redefine what the requirements of those agencies are. And so that's upcoming when we get the gavels back. But I hope that Republicans start to stand up. I mean, I don't understand why the Minnesota representatives that represent the people of Minnesota in Congress are not standing up and speaking out against this. They're just staying silent, or they're defending what's happening to their citizens. These are U.S. citizens who are having their constitutional rights violated.
You're talking specifically about Republican representatives, I know. Meanwhile, let me ask you about what we're going to hear later this week, the public testimony from former special counsel Jack Smith. He's scheduled to testify before your committee on his investigations into President Trump. What do you expect to hear from him during this hearing?
Well, I was at his closed door deposition, and so I expect that we will hear very much of the same testimony around the fact that he found legitimate. He really did find that Donald Trump abused his power, tried to steal an election, tried to influence people to find those votes that would get him the election by any means possible. And I think we will also hear testimony about what he said to me in that deposition in response to a question, that if we don't hold Donald Trump and everyone who was involved in that scheme to steal an election accountable, then it would have catastrophic results on our democracy. And I think Republicans obviously will, go off on whatever tangent they want to go off on. But this was a detailed investigation. He is a very storied prosecutor and somebody that I think has the goods on exactly how Donald Trump incited an insurrection and tried to steal an election.
And the American people will get to hear it firsthand how he sees it and what he learned in his investigation. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, great to have you with us. Thank you very much for taking the time.